Morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Good.
Interesting. I guess I should sign temporarily as president, right? Or no? Because actually you're the secretary and you signed Brett's as commissioner.
I think you sign as president, just put vice, just write in
Yeah,
vice.
okay.
Oh, I signed the wrong place.
Am I good, Mike?
Yep, you're good to go.
Great. Well, it's pretty much 8 o'clock there on the screen. So let's call the August 9th, 2022 Whatcom PUD Commission meeting to order. The first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there, Mike, would you like to do it today?
Sure. I'll lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the next item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. We have quite a bit of new business on the agenda. Any comments before we move to approval?
I have no comments, though. I'd like to make known that I have to leave here at 11:15 today. So,
Okay, so keep my commissioner report down to 1 hour.
okay,
So what you're saying?
all right, yeah,
Okay, thank you, Mike. I will do my darndest.
okay.
And you're not quite within elbow range. But please feel free to speak up if you find us running long.
No, I just have to take Kathy to.
That is not an unrealistic constraint at all.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Otherwise,
And I look for your support, okay?
okay.
All right, okay. Shouldn't be a problem. So no further comments on the agenda?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as it reads.
I'll second that. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have the approval of the meeting minutes of July 26th, 2022, and the claims for August 9th.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as it reads.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the next item on our agenda is public comment. So let's take a minute to see if we have any hands raised. It's very
Yes,
full here.
Commissioner Desmani, this is Rebecca. Yes, Jamie Douglas has a comment he would like to make.
Great.
Can. Let's do I. You should be able to talk, Jamie.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So thank you. I wanted to thank the commissioners and PUD staff. Myself and Dan Douglas, Eric have been able to meet with Chris and Andrew and discuss our areas. We're working on gathering community support that can be used for grant proposal. And I really can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to participate this way. Also, I'm co-leader along with Eric of the TAG Northwest Connectivity Group. our group, shared a draft of position paper on broadband, and we are working now to revise and take feedback that we've gone to work toward another hopefully final version of that we'll be able to share out with you. In addition to that, Dan Douglas and I have written a paper that just set out our recommendations that we shared with the commission, and that is just meant to articulate Dan and mine's independent views. I think that those is not in opposition, but actually in support in many ways of what the TAG Northwest Connectivity Group will be sharing out as well. But they just represent our separate views rather than just the collective view of the connectivity group. And we hope that all those things will be helpful and add to the conversation and decision-making going forward. I would, there have been some struggles within TAG Northwest Connectivity Group, and there are those that are suspicious about our work going forward. I would urge that we all try to be as transparent as possible and open as possible, so that the process of reaching decisions is fully understand, and we can minimize the suspicions that something nefarious is being done in secret places outside of public view. So I thank the commission and the staff, PUD staff, for all their hard work here and for the opportunity to collaborate together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks for your comment as well. I made it a priority to read your paper, so it's helpful. There's lots of great a sentiment that I think is quite reflective of what the community, people who are informed in the community, think about these subjects. So thank you for that contribution and making an effort to do so. About your second comment about transparency, I think it's important to say it's a team effort, and you're certainly doing your part, and we'll try to do our part too. So thank you for that, Jamie.
There
Any more?
are sorry, no, there are no other hands raised.
So although it's extremely full here in the commission room, looks like nobody else is also going to come up and speak. I'm making light. We're empty today. So let's move on with the agenda. Let's go to old business. And we have two items here. One is the strategic plan update and approval. And the broadband, of course, our regular old business item, the broadband update. So let's get on with it.
So first thing is that we've had no changes to the content of the strategic plan, the wording of it. We've had several changes to the graphic layouts, and I want to thank each of the commissioners because you've all had an input on that. At this point, I would just ask for a motion from the commission to approve the strategic plan in its current state so that we can kind of stamp it and publish it, hang it out on the website, get some printed copies available for people and move on. I would also like to note that this is not a final document ever. If you claim a strategic plan as final and cast in concrete, then you kind of miss the point. We expect that from time to time, we're going to come back with revisions to this and, obviously work that through a public process and get it vetted. But this is, this is the best current thinking of where we are. And I want to get it out there for everybody to see. So request a motion and
Let's talk a little bit about that update cycle.
sure.
So the commission's prior history as it relates to strategic plan was to, and we haven't been doing it that long, if I'm correct. But we've been updating it every, I believe, 2 years. John, can you?
Roughly 2 years is reviewed with every budget. And then with every budget cycle, there might be some items to tweak, but more substantive or passive review about every 2 years.
This is a really important issue for us. Certainly, we can wait to implement any changes to that process until Commissioner Grant is back. But are you suggesting maybe to continue that practice? Or are you suggesting that maybe we should have it be a annual process or an ad hoc process for updating the strategic plan?
Not to be glib, but yes. I think that what we ought to have is every fourth year formal review, which may entail, substantial rewriting or, because that's about how long it takes the external world to change enough so that your strategic objectives may change. So I would think that every other year, so you'd have every 4 years a major rewrite, and then you'd have a refresh in between. So that would be the second year. And then what I'm suggesting also is that if something significant enough comes up in the meantime that would warrant some kind of a change, either the general manager or the commissioners could bring that forward and suggest now it's time to look at this particular item. So we have the ability to do it in an ad hoc fashion, not a desire. And that formally, this would be our first rewrite in a while. In 2 years, we'll do a refresh. In 4 years, we'll look at it again and say, is it time for a rewrite or do we want to do another refresh and so on and so forth.
Certainly subject for further discussion in the fall. I think because one of the things I want to bring to the commission's attention, of course, is we have an election this year. And we know we're not going to have Commissioner Murphy on for next year, which I'm sad about, honestly, but not to say anything bad about who's running. I will miss Commissioner Murphy working, but because there's a new commissioner, that might have it might necessitate revisiting the strategic plan again next year. Not early in the year, probably, because speaking for myself, it takes a little while to get settled. So it might be minor stuff, but I just want to, out of respect for whoever becomes the new commissioner, being flexible and allowing for revisiting some of the elements of the strategic plan that maybe a new commissioner feels strongly about.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So I think that the inbound commissioner at some point will have very early on in January, probably will have an orientation from me. And it'll be on the operation of the utility and everything that we've got in the strategic plan, how we're moving forward, what our work plans are, budgets, all that kind of stuff, so that they're completely up to speed on it. It would be appropriate to ask the commissioner at that point, review the strategic plan, have a look at it, and then maybe re-ask in June. And is there anything in the strategic plan now that you see maybe we ought to talk about?
Yeah. I was bringing it up.
Okay.
Just
Well,
so it's in
I'm
our
just
heads.
suggesting a more formal.
Yeah, and that's a good idea, and I think we should give discretion to, like-
Yeah, the new commissioner may look at it and go, no, this is perfectly
Yeah, right,
appropriate. I
exactly.
don't want to mess with it.
Exactly.
That actually would be great news. You'd say we kind of hit it out of the park again.
Any comments, Commissioner Murphy, on that?
No, except that, Chris, I would say that I look at this as strategic planning as guidelines for our whole department to operate by. And so if we are kept appraised, the commissioners, then it's hard for us to know. So I wouldn't wait a whole year to give reports about where we are at in the strategic planning to the commissioners. I would do it more frequently than that, so that they are always aware that we're on top of things.
Yeah, and I were you weren't referring to the, so one of the things I recall Commissioner Grant saying in a previous commission meeting was that our informal performance review process would include that for the GM would include a kind of an update as it relates to the strategic plan. So I think is it fair to say that you're reinforcing that point, or are you making a different point?
I don't remember Commissioner Grant saying that, but it's along the line that I'm talking about. So yes, I would say that's.
Okay, and I support 100% what you're saying too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate that input. If I'll just bear that in mind, and just so that you know that I'm not forgetting about this. One of the things that we're going to talk about later today, it's under new business B, is exactly one of the elements of our strategic plan. So as an example, that's how I think about things. You know, we have items that are in the strategic plan. There are significant milestones that each one of those is going to have to meet. And, you know, my intent is to use the strategic plan to guide both our budgeting and our actual work efforts that may or may not directly involve the budget, and report those back to you. So I have no trouble at all tying this back to the strategic plan, and you guys will know in real time kind of what we're doing vis-a-vis that.
That's fine.
Great.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a motion to
Yeah,
approve the strategic plan, and
yeah, I'll ask for a motion.
And I will make the motion to approve the strategic plan as been presented to us.
I'll second that motion. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the final strategic plan update, please signify by saying aye.
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 thank you, commissioners. We'll work on getting it on the website and getting the printed copies available. And just thank you. It's been a big effort, and it took a lot of your time. I really do appreciate that. Ton of staff time and a stellar consulting group that we brought on board.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, Chris, as well, for your efforts on it, and Jim Darling and all the staff members that contributed to it.
Thank
So,
you. And not to forget our customers and others who had direct
Right,
input.
right.
We had a ton of time put in this by everybody.
And our currently on leave Commissioner Grant for her contributions on it. Okay, let's move on to 5B then, which is broadband.
I'd like to kick it over to our broadband manager, Mr. Andrew Entrican.
I'll use the mic so others can hear. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
So in January, we talked a lot about the notice of funding opportunity was going to be coming from the state broadband office, and it was coming in June, and we were doing lots of things to be prepared. And June came, and the notice didn't come. And just at the end of July, we received a notice from the state broadband office that the notice of funding will become available at some point in the fall. So still no date, but they are letting us know that we can expect the NOFO to drop sometime in the fall. And it's really nobody's fault. Just want to make that statement that it's really nobody's fault at the state broadband office. There's some things going on that are outside of their control.
Oh,
For example, the FCC, if we back up, years, folks have been talking about the need for more reliable broadband maps, because if you recall, the FCC has providers self-report their data, and it's at the census block level. So a provider can, there's many arguments for and against the map, but one issue that really comes to the top that you'll hear a lot of folks talk about is the fact that providers can say they serve one address point inside of a census block, and then the whole census block lights up as being served. And that impacts us at the local level because we can't go get additional grant dollars for any part of that block because it's served. Yes?
Andrew, for the benefit of the public, could you explain what the granularity of a census block is? Is it consistent geographic granularity, or does it vary based on population?
It varies. And there's census tracts, there's census block groups, and then there's census blocks. And so that's the most granular level that we have. And what the FCC is doing now is they're saying, well, we want these maps to be at the serviceable address location. So now what they're doing is they're asking for not only the providers, but other organizations to provide input on whether or not a serviceable location or an address point is actually served or not served. So that all will be coming out in September. So those maps will be made available in September. So that's why the state broadband office is waiting for those maps to come out so they can use those maps to verify against our applications when we submit that to the state for funding for our local community. So lots more in that, but at a high level, that's what's happening right now.
From your perspective, is that as big as it seems like to me of a change? Meaning in a sparsely populated area, a census block could be quite large.
Mhm.
Like square mile.
Oh yeah, it can definitely vary. Absolutely. Large census blocks and very small census blocks, like when you're in an urban area.
So, I mean, that tells you nothing. In a low population area. So, it's almost like non-data. I mean, it's like noise. So,
Well, it's better than nothing, but
Martin.
it's got its flaws.
yeah.
And
So, I mean, now being average, specifying the address, requiring the address, and this has already been adopted by the board. And there's no political pushback on this new requirement. This is actually going to happen.
That's what the FCC, that's what's been asked for FCC to produce is updated granular maps at the serviceable location. They have
But the FCC is directing their
oh yeah,
telecom industry. So to me,
that's happening right now. They're capturing that data, asking the providers to report that right now.
That's a big deal.
And it's not just that, because, overlaid, there's going to be self-reports. So if you have an address that's served on, 25 down, 3 up or something like that, that'll show up now as underserved. And that could be in an area where the census tract appears fully served because there is one, 100 down, 25 up address point there. And that would, surface is fully served. And, today, that's how it would look. In the future, what would happen is, 90% of that census block potentially could be either underserved or unserved. And then we would be able to secure grants potentially to help build out the capital infrastructure to serve customers in that census tract. So I think it's a really big deal. And then overlaid with that, and I know Andrew's going to talk about it, is the digital equity maps that are coming out. And there's a bunch of different things. Andrew's helped develop one that's, I think, really, really good, more than adequate. But Microsoft has also developed one, and it looks like that may end up being a national standard or something like that. So Andrew will talk about that in a little while, but that also will be helpful.
Thank you sorry for the interruption, but
No,
I
that's
wanted to
good.
make sure I focused on an important.
Yes, it's very significant for everyone. And that's the idea. That's what Congress asked NTIA, who's administering these federal dollars. That's what they asked them to do, is allocating these federal dollars to make sure that there is nobody that is unserved after this funding all gets allocated. So that, how do you get there? So there you have it with the mapping as one piece of it. So that really is in line. We've talked about, so switching gears now to the feasibility study. We're on track with the feasibility study as well. So we'll have that nice and polished in time for these grants to open, and everything's still on track with the consultants. They're working on finalizing their budget numbers now, and we'll have a better update here soon. So we're still on track there. Also want to let you know that we have become members of what's called the Shelby Coalition for short, or the Schools, Hospital, Library, Broadband Coalition. And it's really at the federal level, and they have members across the country, many large, many small, everywhere in between, groups that focus on federal policy. And it's a benefit for staff to be for all of us to be members, but for staff to keep us up to speed on what's happening at the federal level. So we have we work with Petrichor and some other partners, Port of Bellingham, who we in the state broadband office, so we know really what's going on at the state level, and of course we know at the local level. But this gives us a really good eye into what's happening at the federal level. So it's one of the tools in our toolkit. And Chris mentioned the digital equity map. Part of that membership, there's many committees and breakout groups within that organization, and one of them is this week. I think tomorrow we'll be meeting with the Microsoft engineers who put together this very sophisticated digital equity map. And so that's really helpful because we have these areas where there might not be an infrastructure investment needed, but maybe the household doesn't have a computer or something like that. So is it an equity issue at that address point, or is it an infrastructure issue? So that there's a big push right now, which we historically haven't spent a lot of time looking at, is this digital equity piece. So that's why we're really spending some time now to put together that, or use some tools like Microsoft that are publicly available for us to use, so we don't have to recreate the wheel. So that's that. And then I'll refer to my notes here. Oh, the port and the county will be approving the interlocals today, both at the Port Commission meeting and the county council meeting, and one of their finance committee meetings. One is for the 750,000 for matching dollars for the East Nooksack and Mosquito Lake project. And then the second is the $2 million for the North Linden project. So that's all going through today. So, I should say. So wanted to give you an update on.
Is there any resistance or opposition to that at the council level? I would be some certain there's not at the port. Is it,
No, I think everything's good. I think it's just a formality. Check the boxes. Jamie spoke earlier. Thank you. Yes, we've been keeping our TAG Northwest friends up to date on everything we're doing, and bouncing back ideas and keeping each other informed of what we're doing. And that's been very, very healthy. So I think we find it tremendously valuable. Likewise, if Jamie's still on the line. So thank you for that. And I'll just end with our conversations with local internet service providers. We're still engaged with our local internet service providers, talking about ways we can serve communities like the Snow Line and Snowwater, and then are there possibilities to partner on the upcoming grant dollars. And so those are all moving. And we're really going to have to wait for the notice to come down, because some of these ISPs have internal policies of where they can partner and where they can't, based on the rules and things like that. So we'll be able to shake that out a little bit more as those developments unfold. So with that, I will stop and I'll pass it back over to Chris.
And I don't have anything additional to add. We've been doing a lot with fiber and telecom the last couple of weeks, and I think it reflects a good body of work. And my thanks to Andrew, to TAG Northwest, and everybody else that's been involved with the effort.
Commissioner Murphy? So going back to the earlier point I made, I'm experiencing a sudden loss of cynicism by that very positive development. There's a term, loss of innocence. I'm experiencing loss of cynicism right now by that move from the FCC. It's very, very positive. And I consider I'm flat-footed and surprised. So I
hope it was a happy surprise.
It's a happy surprise.
Okay, that's good.
But it's almost like, for me, a recalibration, because it has such an impact on and an implication of our tactics, not our strategy, but it has such an impact on what might be possible for us to do. And just letting that sink in, I think for all of us, I mean, you guys have known this for a little bit longer than, and you're working on this every day. But it's important to take a minute to recalibrate to that new understanding, that new realization, and the implication there. I'm wondering if there's potential for us to needing to rewrite our proposed projects, or is that something that would be a mistake, and we've already kind of identified what we would consider the next lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, so when you look at the grant applications that have been put in under the old NOFOs, we wouldn't want to touch those because those were agreed to under the old rules.
Okay.
And this is what Andrew was alluding to in the first place. One of the reasons why the NOFO was delayed until late fall now is what they're telling us, is the recognition that these digital equity tools will be out there, and that'll allow us to look at different areas, look at areas differently, and also for us to judge the likelihood of a grant success. So it becomes one of those critical overlays on the overall grant application. So it'll be baked into future applications. We don't want to go back and revise past applications. That being said, I will submit to you that you kind of end up at the same place in a lot of these, which is good news. A
It
lot
may
of the
also,
places that are underserved or unserved, you know, some of it's just, there's no way to justify it, so you need to get public capital to make it happen. But in other places, you know, there's a way to justify it, but the ISPs haven't had a customer because they couldn't afford it. And this allows you to bridge that as well.
and it might also shed light on many PUDs have raised the concern in the telecom committee about the challenge process. And this may help beneficially impact both the process for the ISPs who have concerns, obviously, about overbill, legitimate concerns. And also concerns from the PUD. If this information is publicly available, these new maps, it could make everybody's life easier.
That's certainly our hope. This will allow us to focus on our applications on areas where everybody says, yeah, that's a good project. We ought to do that.
And there's less ambiguity in them. If there's less ambiguity in the
Exactly.
maps, then there's less ambiguity in the challenge process. So,
And it also knocks the legs out from under a challenge.
Yeah.
If you say, you know, hey, look, from the ISP point of view, if you really don't want to serve this area, why are you fighting, you know, us building capacity in that area?
yeah, I feel like the
Simply serve.
board should be doing another fireworks show tonight. This was a big deal for me. So I'll imagine it. So that it's very, very positive step. And again, I'm a little bit surprised. But you know, I'm sure as time goes on, we'll discover the new normal and the new baseline of how we want to proceed. I don't have any further comments. So there's no action here. So let's move on to new business. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're gonna leave us? The room?
I think he'll join us online.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, let's move on to new business. So the first item on the new business is the approval of a professional consulting services agreement with GDS Associates. And, okay. That's a DBA, but the point is, the consulting agreement with GDS Associates.
So just to refresh everybody, in our strategic plan, one of the issues is looking at feasibility of expanding the utilities electrical footprint in Whatcom County. And we went out with an RFP, got some offers for consultants come back and help conduct this study. There were two very good offers. We've had a chance to review them. And then what you have before you are the two outputs from that. So what we are recommending is that we adopt a professional services contract with EES. Well, it's GDS doing business as EES, who's a local branch that you guys are somewhat familiar with.
Yep.
And then the second, the work order, is actually the scope of work and asking to proceed on that. So this is the item that is in our strategic plan, and it represents the first step forward. When we took a look at the actual responses that came back, both responses were really outstanding. They were fully responsive to what we requested. And then both went beyond what we requested in certain significant ways. So, you know, it was kind of a pick and choose. They were both winners, and which one fit us the best. And part of it, of course, was cost. And you know, we took a look at all of that and the qualifications of the consultants and what projects they had worked on, and it was really extensive. So it was a balancing act. I will note that Commissioner Grant, before she went off on her leave, had a chance to help us write the RFP. Now that was done with a little bit of her input, and we're really grateful for that help. And then she had a chance to look at both of these submissions right when they came back. And she liked both of them and liked the GDS proposal better. And so that was kind of her recommendation to me before she went off. And so I think I'll stop with, we've looked at it. We believe that the GDS doing business as EES is the appropriate consultant for us to work with to do the electric feasibility study. And so we're asking commission to approve the professional services agreement under A, and then the work order, which is the scope of business, under B. And with that, I'll pause and turn it over to the commissioners. Any questions?
I have questions. Commissioner Murphy, do you have questions?
Well, I had the privilege of meeting with Chris yesterday and had a very long, lengthy meeting on this, so I do understand. I have no questions at this time from our meeting that Chris and I had, so covered everything.
Okay, so my question is regarding the study is going to become completed, and I'm glad that you're proposing, you're happy with the proposal from GDS, but I want to ask some questions about
Certainly.
GDS and EES. One of the things is that when a study produces outputs, and when some are not happy with the outputs that the study produces, and depending on the outputs, different people will be happy and different people will be unhappy. One of the things that is not uncommon is for people to call into question the linkages and the relationships of the entity completing the study. So I'd like to understand more about GDS as I believe this was an acquisition of EES.
Yes. I don't know whether it was an outright acquisition or a merger. I'm not sure how to characterize that, but EES is a wholly owned subsidiary of GDS right now.
I'd like to inquire about that. And what are GDS linkages? Who has GDS served in the past? Because we know EES well, but we may not know GDS as well. So those are questions I'd like to ask about. And specifically about their workload as it relates to working with the public utilities and the work relating to private utilities, meaning investor-owned utilities. So I'm open to anybody answering that question, but I'd like to ask about that workload. And if we don't have that answer, I'd like to have it doesn't need to stand in the way of this approval, but I'd like to have follow-up on that subject. So who would like to take that question?
Oh, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
So when we were thinking about how to conduct this study, one of the questions I asked was, okay, who's out there that can do this kind of work? And you know, the answer that came back locally was, well, gosh, EES, and then there's others, power engineers, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, you know, what about PFM, Public Financial Management, which is a very large organization. I believe they're headquartered back east, Maryland or New Jersey. I'm not sure which, but I ran across them when I was in the Midwest. And what I was dealing with there was an unsolicited hostile takeover of a municipal utility by a co-op. And they had made an offer, a financial offer, and I contracted with PFM to actually value the utility. And their value for the utility they came back with was very, very close to one. And I didn't give my information to them, but it was very close to what I had initially estimated the value of the municipal utility to be. And it was far higher than the offer price, which seemed attractive to the city fathers at the time until they saw what people thought the utility was actually worth. They realized they were getting taken. So you know, there was an example, and it turned out that PFM had done hundreds of studies that are similar to that for public power all across the East and Midwest. And they're the largest underwriter of bond issuance in municipal bonds in the nation. So they're a really phenomenal company. So I said, yeah, we should invite them. And in addition, I'd also worked with GDS when I was in the Midwest, and I knew that they worked in that space, and they had declined to bid on the municipal takeover that I had told you about because they would be conflicted. They had done work for both the co-op and the municipal. So they declined to bid on that. That's when we got PFM to come in. But GDS had done a ton of work in this field nationally. So that was the idea.
Very familiar with them.
Very, very familiar with them. And so when we had the RFP almost done, I reached out to my old contact at both PFM and GDS and said, look, we've got this RFP out there, or we're going to be putting it out there in a week or so. I'm hoping you guys would be interested, and if so, that you would respond. And both those organizations said yes. And the fellow, Chris, that I talked to from GDS said, oh, and by the way, we now have a Seattle office. And I was delighted to hear that. And I said, oh, and who's your rep there? And he said, well, Gary Saliba. And I can't remember whether it's purchased or merged with EES. And I said, well, I know EES. They're one of the local folks that we were also going to ask to bid on this, give a proposal. And he said, well, gosh, they're there. And that's who we would use as our local branch office. Turns out they've got offices in Seattle and in Bellingham. So they're a relatively local group. And the first thing that Chris said was, yes, and they're wrapping up some work and they're looking for some additional work, and their bandwidth is fine. And at that time, I didn't know who all the consultants were beyond Gary, because he's the principal, and I've known Gary for many, many years. So I said, great. And so anyway, the RFP went out. We contacted the, kind of the usual suspects in addition to all of the advertising we did. And it turned out that's how we got these 2 responses. So it's a good thing I reached out to both organizations, and here we are. So I don't know if that answers all your questions.
I was, about GDS's clientele, it's primarily co-ops and public sector. Not
It's-
public sector, publicly owned.
Yes, that's correct. It's
They
primarily,
do very
in fact,
little ISP, not ISP, I'm sorry, investor-owned utility, IOU work.
as far as I know, GDS doesn't do any IOU work at
Okay.
all. They do some co-op work, although I think they have enough municipal work now, and they've constrained their growth. They're a supremely high quality engineering group focused at small to mid-sized municipal, which we would be characterized as municipal utilities. And they do gas, electric, and water work and all of that. So that's why I knew about them, because they really catered to small to mid-sized municipal utilities in the Midwest and the South. And they were branching out, but not rapidly. So they're not like Bechtel. They're not international or anything like that. They're more regional and niche focused. They're focused on our kind of utility, which is nice.
So the natural question that comes up as a result of that is that having no IOU experience in terms of client and understanding their the driving factors that IOUs have from the IOU perspective. How are we planning to incorporate that? Because one of the things that we're talking about would be a transaction that would occur with an IOU. And so how are we going to appropriately represent and model what the IOU perspective is?
Well, if you, and I can direct you to the references, but if you take a look at the work that EES has done specifically, they've worked on the municipal side of a number of municipalizations of IOU facilities. So they've been on the opposite side of the table from the IOUs, and perhaps more important than having the IOU viewpoint, they have the viewpoint of what an IOU is likely to do. And I think that's even more important than being to put yourself in their shoes. Is we've done this, and if you go through, especially in California, they've led a number of significant municipalizations to success in that environment. So, as I said, perhaps more important than being able to walk in an IOU shoes, they understand what IOUs are going to do in response. The other thing is that you look at the consultants, and then my background, you've got people that have significant time in IOUs, even though they've spent a part of their career, if not the majority of their career, working in public power. So it's, I've got a pretty broad industry background. I believe Gary does. I believe the other consultants that they brought on board are appropriately skilled in their respective areas to carry this out.
Thank you. And just for the purpose of making sure not to not lose the public, IOU refers to investor
Sorry about that.
owned utility, and the IOU that Whatcom PUD would be working with based on the recommendations of this study is Puget Sound Energy. It's the utility that serves Whatcom County, most of Whatcom County. Thank you again, Chris.
And I just want to be really clear that this feasibility study really could have three outcomes in broad scope. The first is that it's feasible and we should proceed along that path. The second is that it's feasible, but not now, that at some point later, the conditions will be more favorable. And then the third is that it's not feasible for a whole variety of reasons. And we were explicit in our RFP to spell out if the consultant believes that it's not feasible to say so and why. And we don't, so there's no preordained conclusion here at all. And in fact, both of the respondents dealt with that quite effectively, that, you know, they talked about cases where it wasn't feasible and that's what they told their clients. So, you know, I was really delighted to see that, because I want just an honest read from a third party to come in and say, yeah, this looks doable, or no, it's not. And here's why. And we'll get that feedback. I'm confident we'll have that level of feedback from EES.
Any further discussion or comments?
No, like I said, I spent a lot of time. I understand the reason for it. I think it's information that we need to know. Everything could be just working well in Whatcom County with Future Sun Energy and
Exactly.
others, but yet this study will make clear that is we're on the right track, or it will show us any areas that you know, may need improvement. So I think it's a good study.
Well, we'll see. Right, yeah,
So it's a good scope for a
yes,
study.
it's good work, yeah. We've done our job, basically. I have no further comments. So we've got two things to approve. Under 6A is the professional consulting services agreement with GDS Associates. I'll entertain a motion to approve that services agreement.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And under 6B, we want to approve the actual work order. I'll entertain a motion to approve work order 010-08, sorry, -22 with GDS Associates.
You said you made the motion?
I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
I'll second that motion. Any further discussion on the work order?
No.
There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the great explanation. That was very helpful. Let's move on to 6C, which is a bid award to P&P Excavating.
And I believe our AGM Brian Walters, or pardon me, is Kurt, are you going to represent this one?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Wank.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm
Nice
Kurt
to
Wank,
meet you,
project manager here at the PUD. And I'm presenting for the North Settling Pond cleaning at Plant 1 and requesting to award to P&P Excavating to do the project. P&P Excavating was the low bidder for this project. As you know, we regularly clean the settling ponds, try to do one or more annually. This year we will be doing one. The sand and silt coming from our process is settled out in the ponds and it builds up over time and it needs to be cleaned out. P&P did come in under budget on the project. So I'm here to request that we award it to them. Would there be any questions?
Commissioner Murphy?
There is no questions from me, Kurt. This is just seems to be a standard procedure that we have to face.
Yes, it is,
So,
Commissioner.
so I can make a motion to award the bid to P&P.
I just wanted to ask about the engineer's estimate.
Yes. Go ahead.
So in the engineer's estimate, of course, you know, we've experienced prices going up on items like this. Is this engineer's estimate the same number we would have come up with 2 years ago, or is this has this evolved based on new market realities on supply of services?
No, this engineered estimate would be increased over the last couple of years. Yes.
What would you say is the increase in the estimate?
I think one of the
Okay.
biggest costs is trucking is one of the largest cost increase for fuel and just trucking permits. And then also the moving of the material and the pits that will accept the fill material.
And I could go back and look at previous years, but I'm curious, what would this number have been in previous years?
From what I understand, it was in previous years, the engineer's estimate was 124,000.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I've got no further discussion, questions.
And I had made a motion, so without a second, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So I'll go ahead and second the motion to approve approve the bid award to PMP Excavating for the 2022 Plant 1 North Settling Pond Cleanup Project. So we now have a motion and a second. No further discussion, I assume. Then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Kurt.
Nice to meet you too, Commissioner Nismani.
Look forward to seeing more of you.
Yes, thank you.
Moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is 6D, to approve our interlocal agreement with Whatcom County on the Wire Regional Water Supply Plan.
So I believe either Steve or Rebecca will be presenting on this. Looks like Steve, why don't you take it away?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Chris. This is really a simple request for approval for entering into an interlocal agreement with the Whatcom County Flood Control Zone. And it's a request that we made. Rebecca and I met with county staff a couple months ago in an interest to talk about expanding the amount of resources that would be available to complete the regional water supply plan. Going back a couple of years when we first initiated discussion about completing a regional water supply plan, we had a budget estimate then of about $250,000. We, through the Watershed Management Board, the PUD applied for grants through the Puget Sound Partnership, which those grants are for this project are managed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we received $100,000 for the first phase. And then last year we applied and received a second $100,000. As we moved through the regional water supply plan process, we realized that in order to complete the second phase, we were going to be running short. And so Rebecca very efficiently talked to Fish and Wildlife and Puget Sound Partnership about gaining additional funding. We thought we had about $40-some thousand that was going to give us getting us pretty close to completion of the second phase. That resulted in less than that amount of money coming from Fish and Wildlife and Puget Sound Partnership. So we had a discussion with county staff to see if we could come up with additional funding. They stepped up and provided an opportunity to get this $16,000, which will get us pretty close to completion of the second phase of the water supply plan. So the reason that it's interlocal agreement with the flood control zone is that's where the county has identified where the resources could come from, the funding could come from. So with that, I just ask your approval of us entering into the interlocal agreement.
Any questions, comments, Commissioner Murphy?
I really don't have any questions. Thanks, Steve and Rebecca, for continuing working on this. Appreciate it. Seems to have been drawn out and slow, but I appreciate it moving along. So thank you.
I would like to understand if you foresee that we're going to be tight on funding. And if we need additional funding, is that something that the PUD should consider to provide some of its own matching funding for the purpose of completing this work? So that's the first question.
I think
So I
that,
think,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that we, first of all, we always should, attempt to call it as close as we can. And, if we can complete the work with the funds that have been authorized, we absolutely will. Second thing is, if we believe that we're coming up short, we'll look at what that funding gap is. And what I'll bring to you is a proposal on how to bridge that gap. And it may be going back to the county, it may be securing grant funds from the state, and it may be, grant or some kind of funding from us or some combination of that. But I won't know what that looks like until I find out if we have a gap, and then what the recommendation would be to you guys to fill the gap.
But that's kind of what we've done already. That's why we're up with the 16,000 now, is because it continues to, well, with the help of both Steve and Rebecca out there, the money continues to roll in at smaller amounts, and we just keep moving forward on getting this done. So
That's correct.
I don't see an impact to our budget at all. It's just that we'll do what we can with this amount, and if we need more, we'll go look for it. Is that true?
Said exactly.
I'd like to bring up maybe a subtle point here, Chris, Commissioner Murphy, and that is that timing is important on this deliverable. And sometimes going to get little chunks of money can mean a significant additional time and in potential interruption of workflow. So I don't know if that's the case, Steve, Rebecca. I'm just wondering about that. And specifically, the adoption of our drinking water supply plan. It certainly is an important milestone in us preparing for adjudication. And the regional water supply plan is not in any way directly related to our preparation for adjudication, but it does support the PUD's completing homework that our legal team, our fish biologists can build from for the purpose of coming up with solutions. And so in that regard, I do think it's important to get it done timely. And if it's a modest amount of money and that it's going to take time to support it, I would very much support, and based on what you guys think, Chris, Steve, is reasonable, getting on with it and getting it done, as opposed to delaying.
Rebecca has her hand up. She'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe you can clarify. Yeah.
Just briefly, I wanted to, first of all, say that this grant, it has a finite date on it. And the
Right.
end of that grant is December of this year. So this would be the last time we would come before anybody to get more funds. The contracts that we have, the two consultants that we're working with, they fit within the budget that we have now. It would be nice if we had, and I will go back to the Watershed Management Board's implementation strategy, their work plan, and in that original work plan, this particular strategy 3 had actually a proposed budget of almost $400,000 to complete the work. But we have received from WDFW $228,000. And again, we just needed a little bit more to get through what we want to do with this phase 2. It's been my theory that we would actually probably want to go to a phase 3 to really polish this off, because there is a lot of data out there, and that's what we've been doing the last couple of years to collect not new data, analyzing data we already have that has really helped focus what subbasins we've been able to cover, and that work still needs to be done for the whole entire basin, but we're covering the ones that are most strategic, and those will help. Probably maybe we can extrapolate some of that information to some of the other basins, but I don't see this regional water supply plan ending after this phase 2. I really don't. There needs to be implementation of it and continued data collection. I'll let you say something now, Steve, but.
I appreciate that, Rebecca. And I also think that, you know, we've got it under the Watershed Management Board. There are a number of work projects that are ongoing. The groundwater, second phase of the groundwater modeling work. We now are starting to look at work on determining the interaction between groundwater and surface water. The drainage-based management plan is the first part of that was just completed, but the work under the drainage-based management plan, at least as we've initially conceived it to be, could have an impact on the regional water supply plan. And so saying all that, by the end of this year, when we wrap up this phase of the regional water supply plan, I believe that we'll have identified the need to continue to work under the next phase of the regional water supply plan. But that is going to take more than, you know, $20,000 or $30,000, as Rebecca indicated. You know, we could be looking at a potential of another $150,000 to $200,000 to move this forward. Just saying that there are a number of components of work under the Watershed Management Board's 5-year work plan that are starting to come together. And so I think that when we look at opportunities for funding through Department of Ecology and the Puget Sound Partnership in 2023 and 2024, we'll have identified later in this year those opportunities. So I appreciate your suggestion, Commissioner Deshmani, about coming up with additional funding. But at this point, I think that we need to get closer to completion of this phase of the regional water supply plan and see where the other elements that we're working on under the Watershed Management Board's 5-year work plan, where that will drive the need to do additional work.
Great, thank you. So I think the explanation of you gave and Rebecca gave, if I can summarize, is that we are getting additional support from the county, and it lines up nicely with what we want to complete this year. And the boundaries between where this phase ends and a new phase begins don't have to be super. There will be some degree of flexibility on our part to include in phase 3 aspects that don't get completed in phase 2.
Yes.
But most everything, well, I would say 95%, 97% of what we intended to happen. I don't need you to pick a percentage, but most of what we intended, almost all of what we intended to happen in phase 2 will get completed by the end of this year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If there's 2% or 6%, whatever that number is, of tasks that don't get completed, they can be gainfully incorporated into phase 3.
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
a fair statement. Yes.
Thank you. I've got no further questions or comments.
Then I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement.
There's been a motion. I'll second that. There's a motion and a second to approve the interlocal agreement with Whatcom County on the Wire Regional Water Supply Plan. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Commissioner.
Commissioner.
thank you.
Next up on our new business is first half financial report, and happy to announce Annette and our CFO, and Annette, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning,
As we
Annette.
Good morning. As we do every year, we just like to touch base halfway through the year and kind of give you a heads up and kind of an update of a high level of where we're at and where we at compared to budget and where we at compared to last year. And so this is what we're going to do. And so when I was crafting this, it was 90 some degrees outside and very hot. So I thought it would be appropriate to put one of our winter pictures up. So this is looking out of plant 1 at some of our settling basins that are icing over.
Thank you, Annette.
And so we're going to talk about the operations and then touch on the capital projects and where we are with those. But before we get into all the boring numbers, just kind of a picture view of what we deal with and what our water operators deal with. Our industrial water is not potable or is not drinkable standards, but what we do a light treatment on it, and we add a chemical to it and get the dirt to fall out of it. So about 3 times a year, we have to drain these basins and clean out all the gunk that has fallen out. And this is what the basins look like when they're drained. And so all that material gets moved out to the ponds. And then we have to, as Kurt was talking about, we go through and clean out those ponds every year. Not all the ponds, but we pick a pond every year and work on cleaning that out. But that's what that looks like, all drained out. All right, now the boring numbers. The revenue doesn't have a lot of play in it, so there's not a lot to talk about. I highlighted the top one, the industrial water, just because that's the big dollar amount, but actually the percentages aren't that much off. We're a little bit over what we were in end of June in 2021, and then we're a little bit under our budget. You can kind of see why down in the middle on the left-hand side, the water use to date, you can see the industrial water and both the Grandview system are under what we were using last year. And that might play a little bit with, if you remember in June of last year, we had that heat dome. But irrigation is over what we were using last year. The other big number in there would be the assessments, and that's just a timing issue. We received most of our assessments for our existing LUD at the beginning of the year. And so when you just split out half, that 59,000, it shows a big variance, but by end of year, we're usually pretty on target with that. And then just the other little graphs there down at the bottom, lower left, just kind of where the big industrial water customers are. If you remember, the Alcoa did a shutdown or a slowdown, however you want to characterize it, in July of 2020. So we're still seeing low usage there. Back in 2019, at the end of June, Alcoa would be closer to 200 million gallons instead of 5 million gallons. So that's kind of the scope of what we've lost there. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see kind of the overall water usage that we've had throughout the years. Any questions on that slide?
Yes. So 2 things, the industrial water sales. So the main factor for that is irrigation. Is that fair to say?
No. The main factor in that is we have lower usage, but we have increased rates. So those kind of counteract each other. Ends up being a little bit over what prior year sales was, but we're under what our budget is.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I looked under the green there. Okay. That makes sense. And the other question is that PSC and Ferndale consume dramatically less water in 2022 over 2021. Do we have any visibility on that?
They're a generating station, so their usage is very variable. So that's not surprising for them. The actual reason why they're not generating as much in 2022, I cannot speak to, but that is not like our other industrial guys are usually pretty consistent. But they tend to be highly variable on that.
So if I may,
Yes,
the
please.
way that this works in the market is that when you hit a certain heat rate, which is the dispatchable heat rate, that's where a unit can sell into the market at a profit. And typically units won't dispatch until the market hits that rate. And then there's some other issues like how fast you can bring up or bring down the unit. Some of these combined cycle units can take up to 8 hours to both sync and come up to full output. Some of them are quicker than that. But all of that plays into when you dispatch the unit. This unit would appear to me, these units would have appeared to me to have dispatched less. And I would expect that that would be because for most of the first half of the year, it wasn't economic for Puget to run them. Now, that's speculation on my part. There may have been a big maintenance shutdown or something else that played into this, but in other markets that I have experienced, that's been always the key. If they can profitably run the units, they will. And if they can't, they won't. They won't buy the fuel and burn the fuel. So
And that has to do with where the electricity market is and where the natural gas market is.
that is correct. Yeah, that determines the economic dispatch numbers.
So one could conclude that the natural gas market was relatively high compared to last year. And or I don't think electricity market went down. So it probably more reflects where the natural gas market was.
Yeah, the cost of fuel and the price of power both were higher. So that would tend to push all other things being equal, that could equilibrate, but typically what'll happen is that'll push the economic dispatch heat rate up a little bit. And, depending on if the price of natural gas doubles and the price of electricity in the market only goes up 10%, then your dispatch numbers for that particular heat rate would go way up, which would mean that a less efficient unit would be much less likely to power into the market and attempt sales.
And the Ferndale unit is not their most efficient unit.
I really don't know.
Oh,
Yeah, I would expect they have a lot of hydro units that as long as they got water, they're running.
yeah. And then it's been great hydro years. That's another factor
Yeah.
for PSC that they may not run it because they've got good
Yep.
storage.
Yeah, and again, we've got a couple of folks from Puget on the line if they are
Yeah, I don't think
able and
that-
willing to
I don't think
comment.
that's their special, but yeah,
yeah.
certainly. It's mostly a curiosity, and I'm not.
Typically, if they can run these things profitably, they will.
Yeah.
And this would tell me that at least for the first half of the year, that was not the case, or they had some planned shutdown and maintenance work. That's why that ends up that way.
On Alcoa water use, I'm surprised to see that water use went up in 2022 over 2021. What's that about? Is that the rate? Is that again rates? And it's
No,
still
well,
big?
no, down at the bottom, it's just straight usage, so it has nothing to do with rates.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot of their water usage is actually irrigation. So they could be just watering the grounds more. But I don't have any direct insight as to why it's 1.6 million more.
I think Brian has his hand up. Brian?
There was a leak in their distribution system that took a while to find. A leak on their side of the fence. So that added to the water consumption.
Did you capture that?
Brian, we're having a great deal of trouble hearing you. I'll try again.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Really? I'm just around the corner.
Well, come visit that. I want to see you.
Can you? Boy, I don't know. Let's see if I
Come
can.
around the corner.
You're better now, Brian.
Am I better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what I was trying to say earlier, commissioners, is that Alcoa did have a leak in their distribution system on their side of the fence that took a while for them to pin down, and that added to the consumption total that drove it up.
Thank you.
All right.
On this slide, please go proceed, Annette.
So we have a little bit more to talk about on the expense slide. Just overall, we've spent more than we did halfway through of last year, but we are under budget. And so I've highlighted a couple of things I just wanted to touch on and explain. The first is the water purification, and that's the chemicals that we use to get all that sediment out of the water that I showed you in the picture. If you remember, at the end of last year, we received a letter from our supplier, and they were going to increase our cost on chemical 50%, and they would only hold that through June. And it was just due to, again, supply chain issues and costs going up. So that accounts for the increased costs for over prior year and over budget. The good news is I spoke with Devin, our water supervisor, and he spoke with the supplier, and they do not see another increase. And potentially, though they will not promise, we could be seeing a little bit of a decrease coming up. So good news and bad news there. Under the
volume also,
excuse
right?
me?
I mean, our volume also went up, right? Because we had a lot more sediment this year because of the floods.
We
right?
have had more dirty rivers, correct. So we have been using more of our chemical this year. So under the general O&M, it's the biggest thing, which it typically is halfway through the year, is the extraordinary maintenance projects. These are the big maintenance projects we show out on our capital budget, but a lot of them are contingent on weather, and so they tend to happen at the second half of the year. And so that's usually the big swing there. But then also in O&M, we have a labor where we're a little short on labor, and in our budget, we had budgeted a new electrician full-time for the entire year, and that would touch on both the water labor and also the electric labor. And we have not filled that. If you remember, we had budgeted a new refinery substation, and then that was postponed after discussions with Phillips 66. And so we have not filled that electrician position, and it's still up in the air of what we are doing with that currently. And the next line down is the general admin. That also is labor. For the budget, we had budgeted, we are over prior year, but we are under the budget. So prior year, we did not have two of the positions that we do now. So this year we have the new Andrew, the telecom manager, and then we also have Steve's position as a consultant to the GM. So two new positions this year that we did not have last year. And then also in the budget, we had a SCADA position, a project manager position, an assistant GM positions that have not been filled. We have gone to market and are looking for a SCADA tech currently. And so we are thinking that that will come on, but we have not made any movement towards the other ones yet. So we'll see there. And then the other piece of the admin budget discrepancy is in engineering. The city of Ferndale has been working on levee work outside our plant 1, and that's going to affect us. And so in the budgets the last 2 years, we've increased our engineering because we will need to be on top of how that's going to affect us. The city has not gotten to the point where we need to really start putting money towards looking at that, but we expect that to be coming. But that is another piece of the budget being over what we actually have spent. And then the last yellow line up there is the planning, development, and grants, and that changes each year. And that category encompasses our grants, and it also encompasses any projects that we like to keep track of and put in a bucket so we can look at. So for example, the adjudication costs. We like to pull that out of just our standard legal costs so we can see how much we're actually spending on our adjudication. So those are listed, the 2022, 2021, and half of the budget is down on the lower right-hand side over there. Any questions?
No, and I just wanted to thank you on this table, and that's the way you've laid it out with the two variances. From speaking for myself, it's very helpful. So I wanted to Thank you for this presentation. It's easy for me to follow.
Oh, good, thank you. All right, another fun slide. So talking about capital projects, this is a picture of a big crane putting a compressor into our plant 2 intake. Sometimes we get some pretty big pieces of equipment swinging around out here, and so we end up with some good pictures. Okay, capital is challenging. Typically, well, let's just start with the easy one. So the layout of this slide is what we budgeted for the year, what we actually spent in the first half of the year, what we're kind of expecting to spend the second half, and then comparing that to what we had originally budgeted. Bottom line, we are under budget. And again, a lot of this is resulting of our supply chain issues. You know, as we've talked about in our last presentation, costs are going up, but then also the time to do a project is just getting somewhat ridiculous. So that has basically slowed down our capital project spending on many things. Typically, you don't spend 100% of what you've budgeted. You always want to budget what you hope to get done, but it's not always what you do actually get done. So there was 2 here that I just wanted to highlight to kind of have been challenging and just to explain. So the first is that E22 highlighted the Ferndale substation. Just to kind of give some context, we started the engineering on this in 2018, and the budget had that being completed in 2020. When we did the 2022 budget, we were thinking we could get it done first quarter of 2022. Now, again, because of supply chain, the earliest we will be able to get it done is April of 23. So this has been a very challenging project, all the way across. It seems like everything has been a challenge on it. And I just have to say our electricians and Dwayne and Brian and Kurt, you know, our project management have really struggled with this one, but have done extremely well with what they've been presented. And then the second one down there is the high head pump rebuild. This is a typical every year. We pull out one of the big high head pumps that pumps our big water, have it rebuilt and brought back in. And typically, well, let's say typically, let's just say prior COVID, that was a 6-month project. We currently have been working on a certain high head pump since 2019, and it's still not resolved. We had to wait a very long time for parts. And then when the vendor was loading up the pump, they dropped it. And so there was more repairs. Then they shipped it over, and then part of the welds broke and we had to ship it back. And now we have it in-house, but it's still not right. So this is just an example that I wanted to put out there, that just the struggle we have had with some of our projects. You know, it's the times are extended, and because of a lot of our vendors have new staff or staff turnaround, some of the work's not totally what we are expecting. Lots and lots of different issues or things that we're dealing with, but it's a slog to get some of these things done that we're working on. And then just the one last thing, under the smaller projects down on the extraordinary maintenance on the January through June charge, that 94,000, that wasn't anything budgeted. That was pretty much the cost that we had in-house for the frazzle ice at the end of the year, and then also the flooding repair that we had on that. So any questions on this slide?
Annette,
Yeah.
I have a question. Yeah, did the damage from the flood, did we turn into FEMA for reimbursement for that?
Not FEMA, but our insurance company, and they did cover that.
Thank you.
I have no questions for you, Annette. Thank you.
So I just want to return to a topic I've raised in previous budget presentations. You're doing a great job of explaining to the commission the challenges that we're facing. And I think you have our support for how we're communicating, how we're understanding why they are happening. And there's no concern from my part specifically. I do continue to worry about how this, one could say COVID related, but not just COVID related, probably. Gap between what we expect and what happens impacts how we look to the financial community that backs us. And, I don't sit in on your meetings when they happen. There's a little bit of a careful walk about TMI, too much information. Being too diligent in explaining the details, but I've raised this issue at WAPUDA as well. Every PUD in this state, probably every public utility in the country, probably many private utilities in the country, but they have a different mechanism. But certainly bond financed and public sector utilities are facing this kind of difference between projections and reality. And I just know that financial markets can be naive or discompassionate about practical realities on occasion. And I don't know what we're doing in terms of explaining that there's some external factors that are beyond our PUD's control that are affecting our ability to project effectively. Now, on the one part, we can get better at projecting from experience. Maybe develop new ways of doing capital forecasts that better capture factors that are beyond our control. But I just want to raise that issue again. There's nothing actionable in what I'm saying. I'm just noticing that this is now a couple of years in where we've had significant gaps between what we project and what we do in terms of capital. And I want to help support the organization in dealing with that gap. And it's just something to think about. Yeah.
Well, I think,
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think you have brought this up before, and I thought about it after you brought it up last time. And I think, what we're doing is we're budgeting conservatively. And so, for example, our capital projects, like I mentioned, any pre-COVID, post-COVID, anything, you look at any utility, they're not going to hit their capital at 100%. They usually, external forces change, something happens, they get busy, we're not going to hit the 5.3 million exactly. We're going to come in under it, and we know that. So what you're doing is you're budgeting conservatively. So when I go out to budget, when I create the budget, I set rates to cover that 5.3 million. And so as far as the finance markets go, I'm getting revenue to cover all these projects. When we don't spend all of that, we have that revenue to put forward to the next year projects. And so as far as projecting, they're not going to look, I do not, in my experience in dealing with them, it's not necessarily project by project, you budgeted, $500,000 and you only spent 200. What they're going to look at is your expenses, your cash out the door was this. Do you have the revenue coming in to cover that? And how much extra over those expenses do you have? And that's their bottom line, is that they're looking for. Their debt service coverage is what that's called. So we can get better at projecting, but right now we are budgeting in a conservative manner. We have, I think I've mentioned this before, our engineers We have an engineering firm that says basically add a year to all of your capital projects. And I think sometimes when we do go through our budget, we're optimistic. But then also it is being conservative. Okay, if we think we're going to spend it, we need to make sure we have money to cover that. So we put it in the budget. Does that kind of explain some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, Annette, that's such an excellent answer, and because it helps me understand that we're you're figuring out a way to communicate this in a way where we're not presenting this gap as a weakness, but actually as a strength, and that we are planning for a possibility to protect the financial health of the organization. And the gap is a reflection of physical realities, not a reflection of our lack of financial planning.
I would agree with that.
Now, and I love that presentation. I'm sure you're planning to use it that way too. Thank you.
Sure. All right, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. If there's any other follow-up questions.
Say, Annette, I really don't, the only thing I'd like maybe to say on that, whether you say 5 million and we only spend 2 or whatever it was, eventually we're going to spend that, correct? It's not that we're going to put 2 million away and never spend it. It's going to be spent. It's just not going to be spent now. Is that correct?
I would say overall, yes, that is definitely correct. Like for this budget, the very bottom line, we have 5.3 million. And we're projecting that we will spend just over 3 million. So $2 million gap on that. What that does is that stays in our capital funds. And then next year, when I lay out what we have and what we're expecting to spend in capital, that's taken into account that we already have 2 million in the capital. And so maybe we don't need to raise the rates quite as much or go out for as much in bonds.
And that's what I wanted to hear you say. So thank you.
Yeah. Now
So,
on a project by project basis, that might not be accurate. Like on the water projects, the RW33 and RW34, those are dealing with some customers. And so we're kind of at the mercy of some of the customers' timeline and customer decisions. So whether we actually go through and finish those projects is still somewhat questionable. But overall, that $2 million that we have underspent or we're projecting to underspend this year will be spent on capital projects.
Thanks, Annette.
Yep.
No, it's just great to hear you, Annette. I know you were sick for a little bit, so.
I was. Thank you.
All right, nothing more on that. Annette, outstanding job. Thank you very much.
Thank
Well done
you.
as always. If I may, general manager report.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
We have a 6F.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have the NDA with Energy Northwest.
So this was a walk-on topic. My apologies. That's why I didn't have it in front of me, but we've been talking with Energy Northwest and they wanted to share some information with us on a solar plant that is being developed jointly for a bunch of municipal customers. But they wanted us to sign an NDA before, and so you have that before you. I just would remind the commission that we had proposed to bring a delegation of authority change to you that would allow me just to sign these NDAs without bringing them to the commission. This is a very routine thing. In this case, especially Energy Northwest is a public agency subject to the same sunshine laws that we are. So, we take no exception to whatever's in the NDA, but I'm bringing it to you for authorization so they can share the info with us.
I just have a comment, but no questions.
Go and ask yours.
Okay, so my comment is that I'm wanted to, actually, it is a question. Is this the Tucci Energy project or is it a different solar project?
We talked briefly about that yesterday, and I believe it's the Tucci project. It
Maybe
is.
Brian might know. I don't know.
He might. The issue is that it's a large solar plant that's being developed. The size is, I think, 150 megawatts, and the bus bar
Sounds right.
price. Yeah, the bus bar price was approximately 40 last time I heard. And then, of course, that doesn't include transport, but there's a whole bunch of technical information on this project, exact location, intertie queue position, all that kind of stuff. And that's what Energy Northwest wants to share with me, and they can't until I sign the NDA.
Brian, do you happen to know if this is the Tucci project or is it a different project?
Commissioner, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I do not know. I surmise it probably is a variation of the Tucci project where we originally were involved with some other utilities. All of us backed out of that original concept. So I think perhaps the Energy Northwest stepped in.
Oh, to reincarnate. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a modified Tucci energy project.
Yeah, and as soon as I get my hands on the information, depending on what it is, I may
Yeah.
be able to share with you in executive session.
Yeah.
Um,
I look forward to that.
But remember, we would be a participating member on this only to the extent that it would be a better deal than what we're currently getting in tier 1 and tier 2 rates. We wouldn't want to displace low cost power with higher cost power for our customers.
One of the things that we had talked about when we began discussing Tucci Energy was when we were getting ready to prepare for the new rate contract with BPA, tier 1 and tier 2. One of the things that we had discussed before you came on board at GM, and I'm just wanting to recalibrate, is that prior contract, well, we weren't sure where BPA was going to come out. Now they came out very competitive. In addition, renewable independent projects, like at that time, again, I'm just going to call it the Tucci Energy Project, just for the purpose of discussion, not recognizing that may not be the same project that we're talking about here. But at that time, when we're looking at the scenarios, there was two things that happened. One is that since that time, one is that BPA's contract proposals came out much more attractive than maybe we would have been a worst case scenario for us. And then secondly, the pricing of these independent projects went up because of CETA and other regional clean energy state related laws. So it started to look a little bit less attractive. And of course, we ended up favoring BPA. One of the things also that was raised as a point of attraction was that at some point, our PUD will need to leave the BPA envelope. At some point, there'll be in the future where that is quite likely to happen. And that taking a small step and a small chunk of something like this might be very beneficial to our organization. And I'd like your thoughts on that subject. It wasn't a major driver in our prior discussions, but I just would like your thoughts on that. Is it all about price, Chris, or is there some benefit in diversifying our portfolio of supply?
Well, I think, first off, I always look out for the costs for my customers.
Right.
And as I said, I would not displace low cost carbon-free power for high cost carbon-free power and pass that on to our customers unless they request it.
That's not okay.
So that, first and foremost. And when you look at something that's roughly $40 at the bus bar, this is for unfirmed energy. So there's no ancillary services, there's no frequency or voltage response, and there's no transport. You start layering all of that on, and all of a sudden you're looking at $80 plus delivered. And that gets to be where you go, all right, well, compared to mid-C futures, that might not be too bad for 2 or 3 years from now. But as a Bonneville tier 1 and tier 2 customer, we're not necessarily directly exposed to mid-C futures when we get there. Now, that being said, your other point is correct. at some point, and I can think of a specific scenario, if the Snake River dams were breached, that would push us into the market because there wouldn't be enough tier 1 or tier 2 power available to cover all of the municipal needs that BPA currently serves. And that would push us into the market. Then I would be looking at higher priced power than what we pay today in order to hedge against floating mid-sea prices. So I would seek to hedge my customers' long-term costs below, if I could, what was out on the market. And so yes, in a case like that, we would definitely want a slice of a project like this. Now, as I said, this is all totally speculative and premature. I don't know the details on this project. I don't know, for instance, if it has any storage associated with it on site, which would mean less firming, less ancillary services. So, all of that could play a difference on how you evaluate the thing. But even at 40, with any kind of transport on it, you're not at this point competitive.
I'm going to go even reasonably competitive.
You're in there if tier 2 flips and becomes higher than tier 1, then you're perhaps competitive on a slice of that. And you're certainly, depending on what you pay for ancillary services, you might be competitive as a hedge against mid-sea prices in 2025, 6, 7. So, it's an interesting dynamic in the power markets right now.
And I'm wondering, then, if there isn't, based on what you're talking about the pricing, if we should keep our eyes open on other alternatives for supply, small chunks like that might support us. And
I can assure commissioners that I look at that all the time.
good. And
This
so,
is an everyday activity.
so this is a study that is you would argue is prudent.
It would
and
be
that's-
prudent for us to find out the information,
Right.
and we need to sign the NDA to do that.
Right. We're actually not talking about any money here. We're just signing the NDA. And I look forward to continuing to explore. And you're telling me that you're doing that
All the time,
all the time. And so we're
Every
looking
day.
for other chunks out there
all
to-
the time.
to complement our
day.
portfolio. Good,
Yes.
good. I'm happy to hear that. So I have no further comments on this agenda.
I have no comments, and I'll make a motion to move forward to having Chris go ahead and sign the energy laws.
I'll second the motion. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners. Now, if I can jump to the general manager report.
Please do.
All right, mine's really short this time. First, the John Humphreys public record request increased a little bit. It's over 28,000, but less than 29,000. It's not yet complete, so we can expect more charges before we get the final tranche of emails out to Mr. Humphreys. And I don't have a forecast on what the final amount's going to be on that. Second thing is that we met with the Ag Board last night, and we were talking about all kinds of things that may or may not play into our litigation for the adjudication. So they brought up some interesting points, some things to think about, and it may lead to plans that are different perhaps than what the Ag Board was looking for, because we're looking out for our customers. That's our really our final measure. And what I'd like to do is just let you know that we had the conversation, that we're going to be talking a lot about that in the next couple of weeks, and I'd like to do an executive session with you next time and do a high level brief on what we're thinking.
Recognizing that there's things to be kept in confidence relating our water adjudication related positioning. There is a study that Henry Brilling sent out, and that I think we got a few days ago.
Commissioner, I would ask you not to characterize that, or that's part of the subject we want to talk about.
That's exactly what I was going to check on. Is that something that we're not publicly disclosing?
That was part of what we discussed yesterday that
Yeah.
triggered a ton of thought between John and I and Steve, and I've got to say mostly John, and thank you, John.
Mhm.
We want to fully vet that, think it through, and
Confidence.
then
Okay.
present it. to
Yeah,
you.
and I totally respect that.
I just want to give you a heads up that, we're going to have an executive session next time. There's the background.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation and I just wanted to follow up on that.
Third and last thing for me
Will that
is.
be at our next, sorry, will that be at our next meeting then?
That's the intention.
Yep.
And it may take over 2 meetings, but initially, next meeting.
August
It's
23rd.
funny when these things trigger thoughts. I mean, it's just amazing how one of these thoughts can kind of flower into something that is not what anybody intended, but it's like that's an interesting way to view things.
Mhm.
And we've kind of had that epiphany, if you will. I'm not going to say like it's changed the world or anything, but it's just it's interesting how things develop. We want to share with you the thinking.
Yeah, great.
And then last, the WPUDA holds general manager meetings. They hold statewide GM meetings, but we also have the West Side meetings, which is where just the west of the Cascade GMs get together. We talk about mutual aid, lead times, bargaining unit contracts that are coming up, material shortages, all that kind of stuff. And I will be down in Shelton on Thursday all day. Just letting you know I'll be at that meeting.
There's
That's
a
it.
water workshop in mid-late September that WPUDA is putting on.
In Spokane.
In Spokane, I believe, yes.
I still don't have the agenda for
checked
that. either.
yesterday, and there was promise last week, and we checked yesterday. We still don't have the agenda for that. Depending upon the agenda, my schedule, I may be at one or two of those days.
Yeah.
And depending on what they were covering, I was looking at an educational opportunity on some water law stuff. And it was either a third party presenting or the WPUDA presenting. And I prefer to go to the WPUDA presentation if it's available. We still got to find out what's on the agenda. So it's possible that I'll be attending that as well.
If I may, John, you planning on being part of the water workshop?
They're just attending to. There was a presentation, I believe, at a water workshop for a CLE this last year on methodologies and other discussions of Western water law evolutions. I want to see what's on the agenda. There may be some sections that are pertinent that would be evaluated to attend that for me. If there is, I'll go. I've already made a hotel reservation just to have it booked, not knowing I've booked maybe booked.
Yeah, what's the hotel there? Forgot.
Yeah, it's one of the Davenports,
Yeah.
5 Davenports, right in the same block area.
I think it's the old Red Line or something like that.
I'm not sure where it was. but
Yeah.
Anyways, I may back out if there's nothing of material certainty. I'm just letting you know that I may run over there maybe a day, I don't know.
Yeah, let's stay in touch. Because I'm planning to attend as our water committee person. But Commissioner,
When I get the agenda, I'll send
yeah, Commissioner,
Nothing else.
Commissioner reports.
Well, no, we're first
we're-
is the
I'm sorry,
operation.
did I cut you off? Were you done or?
Well, I was finished, but we have, I've asked Brian to give us an update on the operations.
I'm
side.
sorry, forgive me.
No problem. So that's item number 8.
Yeah.
At
I
that,
jumped in.
I'd like to kick it over to Brian Walters, our Assistant General Manager.
Hello again. Chris has asked us to add to the regular agenda an item on, titled Operations Report. And the idea was each report would touch on an aspect of our ongoing operations, whether electric, water, etc. But I'm going to sort of bait and switch today, and I wanted to spotlight an item that's in our budget, has been there for a few years. It's the single biggest capital improvement project we have in our budget. And I thought this would be a good segue into, since we're entering the budget process for 2023, to bring some of this project to your attention. It's not, I don't want to have a technical discussion at this point, just to give you some highlights. But I'm talking about the rebuild of water treatment plant number 1. Rebecca's gonna help me. I've got just a few slides to show. Can you put those up, Rebecca?
I thought I had them up here, so let me try again.
No, they're up. We
They're
can see
up?
it. Yep.
Well, that's
Do you,
interesting.
do you want her to advance the slide, Brian?
Well, I can't see the slides.
I'll be in there in a sec, Brian.
I'll just
That's
hold
all
it.
right.
I'll just
That's
hold it
all
on the,
right. I've got a set hard copy. I can go off that.
okay.
It's no matter.
Hmm.
So if you go to the second slide, Rebecca, just
Sure.
the water treatment plant, please.
Okay,
Uh,
now
this-
what? I know, but now it's not advancing. What? Oh, I
There
thought
we
I could
go.
just do it here. Okay,
1 second. We
Brian,
paused.
the second slide is up.
Commissioner
Looks like-
Murphy has another hour and 15 minutes. It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, I also should mention, commissioners, there is a hard copy of the slides right there before you, in case we continue to have difficulties. But what we are talking about is water treatment plant number 1. This is our plant, obviously, downriver and south of the city of Ferndale. And what you can see there is our intake facility on the river, and then our treatment plant across Ferndale Road to the west. In 2010, we did our first comprehensive study of the industrial water system. Within that plan was a recommendation of various capital improvement projects we could make to the system to make it more reliable for the long term. Water treatment plant number 1 was in that original study in 2010. We then updated the industrial water system study in 2019 using RH2. Then did a further refinement in 2021 using Murray Smith. Next slide, please. Murray Smith came back with their report in 2021. As a result of that, we then entered into an agreement with Murray Smith to do conceptual design and preliminary design studies for water treatment plant number 1. Why are we doing this now? Why is the urgency? We've got a plant that's tired, built in 65, is 57 years old. It's beyond its expected life. We're finding an increasing difficulty in maintaining, repairing, updating that plant. Annette, in her earlier presentation, mentioned just one of the items, which was the high head pump, which normally would be, a short-term, a few month process to get it refurbished. And now we're in over 2 years and we still don't have that high head operating properly. What does this represent to us? It's a growing reliability, operational reliability risk for us. This plant is needed. We need it for flexibility. We need it to back up plant 2 when we take plant 2 down for maintenance. We need it, when we have poor river conditions, whether it's frazzle ice in the fall, winter, or if it's, dirty water in the spring with the glacial melt, etc. So it's a plant that we can't have offline for any length of time. It's right now, we could take one or the other plants down for a few hours. If we were to lose plant 1 for an extended period of time, quite frankly, we'd have to curtail water supply to our customers. We can't maintain a service out of one plant over the long term. And so I'm bringing this to you now because the timing is such that we really need to start moving forward on this project. Right now, our water demands, I looked at the average water demand of our aggregate of all our customers in Cherry Point through July of this year. And right now, we're only averaging about a little over 10 million gallons of water supplied daily. That amount is within the capability of either one of our plants. So it's sort of a window of opportunity to look at starting to refurbish, rebuild that water treatment plant one. With the demands down, that helps us. We can take the plant offline for a while and do the work. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we retained Murray Smith actually at the first quarter of last year to start working on conceptual design and then moving into preliminary design of a rebuild of the plant. We've been working closely for the last several months with Murray Smith. The main focus initially has been on a campus plan for the water treatment plant, looking at placement of new facilities and how we could interconnect the facilities while at the same time continuing to operate water plant one to maintain service to customers, bearing in mind that there will be outages over a period of time. I'm on the slide right here. Murray Smith has now come back with alternate campus plans. And we worked with them. They offered 3 different alternatives. We came back, we looked at the alternatives they've offered, and then we suggested a 4th alternative, which was a hybrid of a couple of them. Murray Smith then took our input and just did a conceptual design of what that hybrid would look like. And then they also came up with a high-level cost estimate for the alternatives. The 3 alternatives were number 1 was a multi-structure campus, similar to what we've got at water treatment plant number 2. Second alternative was a single large structure that all contained many of the processes that we use in treating the water. And the third was sort of a multiple structure concept with basins. And what we've settled on is the hybrid, which is actually a single structure with the movement of one of the basins. It looks like it would work the best. It accommodates by going to a single structure. And I'm not intending to show design drawings today. You wouldn't show up on the. Don't worry. Sorry for the confusion. We've settled on the single structure as the best approach that would give us the flexibility to work around operating the water plant, the existing water plant, until we're ready to cut over. And the single structure cuts down on having to do a lot of temporary bypass piping to bring new processes online while still serving the customers. I want to jump ahead to the slide, Rebecca, that says current estimate of costs for WT1. Here again, commissioners, if it's not on your screen, it is in that hard copy before you.
Yeah, it's on the screen now.
Okay, thank you. One of the challenges Murray Smith's had, and we talked about it with Annette's presentation, is engineers' cost estimates. With COVID and inflation and everything that's going on, it's been extremely difficult for engineers to come up with a really solid estimate for future project costs. So what Murray Smith did was took a very conservative estimate. They basically put in 40% contingency. Plus they jacked the material costs. They said during materials acquisition, they'd anticipate material costs going up at least 12%.
12% per something or 12% period?
12% per halfway through construction. So you'd start out with a known cost, and then as additional materials are acquired, they cost an additional 12% above estimate.
And it's about a 2-year construction cycle.
Yeah, about a 2-year cycle, correct. What Marie Smith also did was took their experience, they looked at other projects that they'd already done and looked what actual costs of materials and labor for the contractor were, factored that in. They also got equipment quotes directly from vendors to try to come up with a reasonable effort. So with that in mind, we're looking at a 2-phase project. First phase would be a utilidor. It would be a corridor, a tunnel underneath Ferndale Road that we then put the piping and electrical conduit, valves, anything we need to access would pass through this tunnel from the intake facility over to the treatment plant. And the initial estimate on that is about $5 million. Now we need to move on this project because I'm jumping ahead here on the slides, but it's needed. We have to build that project in advance of a project that the city of Ferndale and the Corps of Engineers is working on, which is a levee improvement project that would also involve changes to Ferndale Road. So we want to get in there ahead of them and have our utilidor complete before they start doing the levee improvements. Otherwise, we'll be coming back later, tearing up a project they did and redoing it. So
Chris, Brian, what is the timeline of wanting to get commission approval for this first project?
Well, we'll be bringing the utilidor back to you for approval late this year, early next year. I think the core project for the levee, if I'm not mistaken, is a 2024 project. Is that correct, Brian?
correct, 24, 25.
Yeah, so we got to be out of their way. And the other thing about this utilidor is we're going to use it for some current operations. Is that not also correct, Brian? So we need this thing just to survive today, even if we're doing nothing else.
The current situation is if we had a problem with the piping under Ferndale Road or
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yep.
the electrical conduit running over to the intake, we'd have to dig up the road to even get at this facility. It's all buried, direct buried. We have no way of accessing those facilities without a major trenching of the road, shutting down Ferndale Road for a significant period of time. So this is our opportunity to jump in there ahead of the levee project, get that work done, set us up so we're then ready to do the campus improvements on the treatment plant side of the road.
But our purpose today was not to ask your approval. For
No,
this.
it's
It was
just
just to give you,
informational, yeah.
to give you an overview of the project.
I was curious about that.
And you're exactly correct.
I just wanted to call your attention to, I mean, we're talking about phase one, the utilidor at 5 million. But now the sticker shock, quite frankly, is the campus development. The early estimate right now, high level estimate, $60 million to do that project. And, you know, originally when we first started talking about that project, we had budgeted $37 million. Well, that's now ballooned to $60 million for just the campus side.
So Rebecca, could we advance to the next slide? Because that really addresses what Brian's bringing out right now. Thank you.
So it's laid out. The original study in 2010 was a 31 million project. Our budget contains $37 million, and Marie Smith's 2022 estimate based on current reality is 65 million, which includes the utilidor. So challenges, we've got a big budget rates impact potential here for this large of dollar project. We need to go ahead with phase one. As for the reasons stated. If we delay on phase two, our reliability risk continues to climb. And that's just the reality as well, given the age of the plant. The other thing we looked at was trying to chunk up and phase the project more so we weren't hit with that cost within a short period of time. But the reality is trying to build multiple facilities on that site while running the plant. Not only is it a logistical nightmare and trying to coordinate that because we're constantly doing, as we bring a facility online, doing piping to tie it into the original facilities, and then we remove that piping when we get farther along. So it adds to the complexity of the project, and it'll add to the cost. If we phase the project into multiple phases, smaller pieces, the contractor is going to be doing this mob, demob, remob, and it's going to be a challenge in terms of those costs. It's going to lengthen the overall time to complete that project, and overall cost. We'll have cost exposure because it's very difficult to lock in a single bid for the entire project if you're mobbing and remobbing and doing all that. So I think I'll stop at that and see if there's any questions. Excuse me, we'll go to the next slide, please. Next steps is we're going to continue to work with Annette, and we're going to run financial scenarios to feed into the 2023 budget process. Looking at these costs, seeing what impact they have, seeing how we can mitigate that impact will be part of the process going forward. We're going to keep working with Murray Smith to refine the project design, see where there's some cost efficiencies there that we could capture if possible. Of course, a big item will be, we're going to discuss this project, given the size of the financial package here, talk to our Cherry Point customers, discuss the risks in not doing something versus going forward, get their input, how they feel about it. It's got a similar process to what we did when we proposed the storage project out in Cherry Point. We got customer input and then acted accordingly. And of course, we're going to keep, this is just the first discussion. Keep you commissioners in the loop, get your input as we move forward as the 2023 budget develops. And with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions.
I have a comment.
Do you want to go first?
I went first last time.
Okay. Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Question number one, why are we using Murray Smith?
We came
I
back
seem to
to, if you remember, we used RH2 and then based on a number of factors, we went out with a solicitation for this additional work and elected to go back to Murray Smith because of their prior experience with us. And we felt in this particular case, they are the more appropriate firm to work with us on this redevelopment. They were the firm involved when we rebuilt Plant 2. So we can learn a lot of the lessons learned from that plant, incorporate that into the design for Plant 1. And it was just felt they were the best firm, most qualified to help us do that.
Well, I'll let you go with that. I thought we had issues with them on Plant 2, and I thought we'd maybe take others into consideration in future projects. But if you're thinking they're the best at this time, I mean, I got to trust that you're making the right decision, but I question having them do it. The other thing is are you taking a 1965 plant and just bringing it up to 2022? Because I don't see this plant, and I don't have the information I wish the commissioners could be more involved. Because I don't see us meeting possibly the future needs. One of the things is we cannot draw all our water rights at this time. And I think that's a good case for someone to come along and say, we're going to take your water rights away. If you can't pump it, we're going to take away what you can't. So I think we should consider that. Storage is a big one. If you're going to do this, you might as well put some money for storage. We do have drought issues. I don't even know if you can run 24 hours, plant one, without pumping from the river. I don't think we have the capacity to even last 24 hours. I don't know. So I'd like to see us look at this project for what we need for the future instead of just for the present. We may be providing water for Ferndale City again. We may be providing water to other cities someday in the county, and we might as well be planning that now instead of waiting until that happens.
Commissioner, I'll attempt to address some of those questions. Number one is when we rebuilt the intake facility in the early 2000s, the pumping capacity and the wells in that facility, we can pump our entire water right for water treatment plant 1. We can pump it. And we demonstrated that once. We actually pumped it and just to show we could do it and then put water back in the river. That was several years ago. So in that case, for that element of water treatment plant 1, we can pump our entire water rights. The other thing is, starting with the RH2 study in 2019, we tasked them with looking at a design that would allow us to meet the current aggregate operating demand of our existing customers at Cherry Point. In other words, right now, the capability of water treatment plant number 1 is about 12 million gallons a day. That means we can only treat and push out that much water. Doesn't mean we can't pump more. 12 million gallons. We said, let's take a look at bumping up that capacity to 21 million gallons a day. So the design that RH2 came up with, the conceptual design back in 19, and then Murray Smith picked up on and refined in 2021, was based on the 21 MGD. It is a modern plant. It's designed for current and future needs. But the reality is we can't pump our full water rights, even if the customers wanted to take that water, without basically upsizing our entire system from water plant to distribution to delivery. So that would be a cost of easily well over $100 million. I would say probably closer to $200 million to do that. And we did not feel that, given the current situation with the actual water takes by the customers, that those customers would want to absorb the rate impact of that size of project. So this is what we settled on. We will be bringing designs to look at as we move forward. But right now, that's where we're at.
Well, when I said that, about pumping our water rights, I remember that test that was done. And but my question was more led to what we could get out into the community through our distribution, and which we are at, what, 12 million right now, I believe it is, and you want to go to 21, I think you said.
21
Is that correct?
21 on the treatment plant is a starting point, and given the fact that the treatment plant has to be upgraded because it's we have risk of failure. Right now, if we lost a single major process component, our ability to pump or treat and pump 12 million gallons a day would go down to 3. So we have a single point of failure contingency that would take our treatment capability to a quarter of what it is right now. So the current need is the water treatment plant. then as we go forward in the future, looking at expansion of our distribution system is also warranted. But getting
So
back
Mike,
to
I want to thank you for the observations and let you know that, first of all, we're looking at a plant that has increased the throughput 70 to 80% over what the current plan is. So it's a big increase in the amount of water that we can push out. You're right, we should be looking at all that stuff, and we will. And we're going to be bringing it back to you guys with a lot more detail. And if you'd like, in fact, it'd be very valuable for us if you got involved in some of these meetings with Murray Smith, and we'd be happy to invite you and even schedule the meeting so that you can attend.
Yeah, I would like to attend because I think as we look forward, we're dealing with possible droughts, we're dealing with climate change, we're dealing with a lot of issues, and quality water is important to me. And and even though right now it's all going to industrial use, that's not saying that will be our future. We don't know if someday we may be providing water to back, say, city of Ferndale and other places too. It's something we should
substantial potable water.
or potable water too. So I just want to make sure that if you're going to spend 60 million, and if you have to go to say 100 million, our customers may not like it, but I appreciate all they do for us and supporting these and the bonds, but really we have to think of the whole community, not just our customers. And what is needed in the future is something we should be really focused on. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that Commissioner Murphy, that you're going to be involved in that capacity. It's one of your strengths, many strengths, your background with facilities, and you've always had great observations and input on this subject. So I'm happy with that. That's something that I don't have to, at least not this year, track as closely. I believe that Commissioner Grant got a tour of I don't know why I always get it mixed up. This is plant 2 or plant 1? Plant
2 is here.
Plant 2 is here. Plant 1. Plant 1. And when's the last time you've been up to plant 1? Commissioner
A couple of years ago.
A couple years ago.
Well, just before COVID, I would say COVID shut everything down, shut all my visiting down to the plants. And
Yeah,
scenes down.
I would like to have a tour of plant 1. It got covered in a very cursory way when shortly after when I had my facility tours, but I haven't actually
That's
had,
easy to arrange. We'll take
Yes.
care of that. We'll
So-
work with you.
and we just follow up whenever it works for you guys in the next couple weeks. So I can be more competent on the subject. And I don't have anything else to add. Thank you, Brian, for bringing this important topic forward. And putting the numbers like you see them, and it's better to hear that news now. So thanks for doing that.
And Brian, I'd like to say too,
Thanks for the courage.
I appreciate, you putting up with my questions and stuff, but I know you're always in the best interest of all of us here in the community. So I do thank you for yours and everyone else's work too on it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Brian. Good job.
Well, and thank you, Chris, for adding this to the agenda.
Oh, my
I think
pleasure.
this is going to be a great vehicle for communication with the commission.
The plan is, you guys hear about broadband all the time. I need to make sure that you also see everything that's going on in the rest of the outfit, which is an awful lot of work.
Yeah.
An awful lot of really good work by really good people.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are completed with the operations report. Let's move on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Murphy, would you like to go first?
I can do that because I have nothing to report. So that gives you the next hour.
Well, I gotta save 10 minutes for public comment, but 50 minutes, Commissioner.
Let me,
Don't forget to debate the motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah, there's a couple minutes there.
let me pull out my. No, I have two items. First is I wanted to have a conversation about Laputa. And just there's September's gonna be an intense month for Laputa because we have back-to-back meetings. What I mean by that is the association meetings are September 14th through 16th. One of the things that I initiated and that is likely to happen in that window is the meeting with the head of the broadband office.
Mhm.
I'd like to make sure that either staff are either present, which would be great. But if that's not practical, that we have a meeting of the minds conversation to make sure that when I talk to the broadband office, I am completely aligned with where we are on the bits and bytes of, so we'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
Just to prep,
Yep.
Um,
And Andrew and I can make sure that that happens.
or Commissioner Grant, depending, I mean, I'm right now, the assumption is that I would be covering that. But I'm also recognize that if Commissioner Grant wants to cover that, then that's fine too. But one of us should be briefed and
Yeah,
aligned.
I would
for
assume
that.
it would be you until we hear otherwise.
Yeah. I'm ready to do that.
Okay, good.
And then the following week, I've got to head to Spokane for the water committee. That also, the 21st is my birthday, so I guess I'll celebrate my birthday in Spokane. Anyway, there is one other item. I mean, I guess I want to discuss Laputa meetings. Mike, are you thinking of going to Olympia in September?
I was not planning to go to the Wakuta meetings in person, but will be there on Zoom.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm planning to attend in person for both.
And if you're going to be there, I mean, I'm good with you representing us during the board meeting on Fridays because,
I love
Technically-
having you there.
huh?
I love having you there.
Well, I go there, but I see, you sit up front like you did last time and it worked well because you're at least there. They don't have to turn to me and say, we're just walking.
Well, what I'm there is the back,
Oh, okay.
like and if I ever if I'm usurping, you let me know, because that's not my intention. My intention is to be there physically present, but absolutely back you in the capacity and fill in the gaps. There's some things you can do in person.
Right. Well, I'll be at the other meetings plus the board meeting on that Friday. And at the water workshop in Spokane, I'm still trying to figure out if I can go to that.
Okay. We'll figure that out. The only other item I had is that there's a conference in town that starts today, put on by WIDA. I talked to you, Chris, about that. John, you may or may not be aware of it. It's the whole unifying theme of the conference is resilience. So it's a buzzword that I didn't coin, but it's becoming a buzzword. And certainly we incorporate language related to the word resilience in our strategic plan. There's many presentations that the county executives present, the mayor's staff, if not, I don't recall if the mayor's actually presenting. But it's a who's who of Whatcom County's influential people. And the content is, today there's some tours. The content is tomorrow. I've already raised it with Chris and Mike, you're fine with me registering and then getting reimbursed from the commission. This would be an ad hoc request to the commission though. I would like to report on my per diem report, attending the conference tomorrow and today's Tuesday, tomorrow's Wednesday and Thursday. But I want to get explicit approval for that from you. Because, we have adopted a new practice for per diem policy. And if it's something out of the ordinary like this, I should get explicit approval. So are you fine with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I want to get that.
Yeah, not to engender any debate because it's the opposite. Because you've adopted our strategic plan now, and because it is largely focused on resilience, both from an asset management perspective and an environmental resilience and sustainability perspective, it would be very appropriate to have you there representing the views of Whatcom PUD, because we've got that out there in official documents. And and it
You
would
make an,
help.
if I'm basing my comments based on our strategic plan, it's appropriate for me to speak. I will not speak outside of those boundaries, of course, because I want to make sure that we have a chance to deliberate on anything else that I say.
So for the record, that was unanimous consent on the authorization.
Thank you, John. That concludes my report.
I think that moves us to public comment.
Yeah, let's move on to item number 10, public comment.
No one has their hand raised yet.
Let me just give it a minute. Brian, is there any plan for recreational facilities at the Plant One rebuild?
No, Commissioner, no.
No PUD water park? No?
No, but we are looking at solar panels on the roof of the structure that we built, so.
Boy, that's it. That's a have to, yeah, for sure. And that was to the public's benefit. That was a joke. And it had nothing to be taken out of context.
All right, it appears we have no public comment.
Yeah, I'll close the public comment period. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Great. Well, then I will call the Whatcom County PUD August 9th, 2022 meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending.